Okay, once again, welcome to News Talk from 9 to noon here on SantaCruzVoice.com. I'm Charles Freedman. Our program commences. It is 9:06 on a lovely Wednesday morning. Okay, this is how we do it. We just prattle on about the issues of the day. I've got some observations to share with you today, but the most important thing that happens on our program is when you call in. Yeah, you. No reason why you shouldn't. 831-265-5050 is the number. I'm sure that some of the things that will be said today will either incite your agreement or your malice. Share either one. We're glad to have your input and value it very much. 831-265-5050. We've had a couple of lively conversations lately concerning what's been going on in both wars, Russia and Ukraine, and of course Israel and Hamas. I've got some observations to share with you on both of them. Let's start with Ukraine. I must admit I'm indebted to Bill O'Reilly for pointing this out to me, but it works both ways. His point was that Vladimir Putin miscalculated what Donald Trump would do. What Putin was hoping was that Donald Trump would become exasperated, would lose patience, and would then walk away. Would simply abandon America's support for Ukraine, figure it's a bad job, nonsense, nothing, I have nothing at stake here, and that he would allow then Mr. Putin to simply accomplish his goal, to invade, conquer, and occupy a neighboring country. Well, Mr. Putin miscalculated. Donald Trump is not in that mood. But what O'Reilly didn't point out was that Donald Trump miscalculated too. Both of these people were guilty of expecting the other to behave differently. Now, I've just described how Mr. Putin expected Mr. Trump to behave. And he hasn't. Well, what did Mr. Trump expect? He's actually been fairly open about that. One of the things about Donald Trump, I don't care whether you like him or not, you have to admit that he is really quite transparent. If you ask him a question, he'll tell you what he thinks. And when he says, I'm disappointed in Mr. Putin, he's telling us the truth. Why is he disappointed? Because his expectations were not met. That's why. Because he was under the impression that if he made some conciliatory noises, like intimating that it was actually Ukraine that had started the war, we all remember that. Well, that was a silly statement, really. We all knew it at the time. We go, what in the hell is Trump saying that for? It makes no damn sense. It was a tactic. It was a tactic designed to ease Mr. Putin's course into what Trump expected him to do, which is, let's get together and make a deal. Let's get together and end this war. Let's have peace. Well, Mr. Trump, just as Mr. Putin misapprehended Trump, so did Trump misapprehend Putin. So here you have two very powerful men, leaders of their countries, going into a situation under false impressions and then being disappointed, to use Mr. Trump's own word, when those false impressions proved false. And the expectations these men had turned out to be poppycock, nonsense, foolishness, horse feathers, bourgeois. Well, you've had that experience in your life, haven't you? Something you expected suddenly turns out completely different, and you're rather nonplussed, aren't you? It's a normal human reaction. Well, that is where we find ourselves now with Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin. The main distinguishing fact here, and we can all thank God for this, is that Mr. Trump and the Western alliance are in a far stronger position than Putin and Russia. I'm not talking about just military hardware. I'm talking about something that counts for a lot more. I'm talking about economic strength. The kind of thing that won the Cold War, kind of thing that actually won World War I and World War II also. The Central Powers in the First War, the Axis powers in the Second, they had a lot of military strength, but they could not match Western productivity capacity. The Nazi German industrial machine was a fraction of what the United States could bring to bear. Today, that equation is even more out of whack. If you balance American and European capacity against Russian capacity, please, Mr. Hemingway. So frankly, this is basically a predictable thing. We see who's going to win, who's going to lose. Hey, duh. The question is, how desperate is Vladimir Putin to hang on? And his nuclear arsenal makes that a real question to ask. How crazy is Putin? That's the question. Now keep that question in mind. You're looking at your adversary, the villain, the bad guy, and you're asking, how crazy is he? Think of a situation where the police have a criminal at bay, a desperate character. He's a bad hombre. And the police have him surrounded. And they're saying, come out with your hands up, surrender, give up. How crazy is he? Will he do the sane, rational thing and surrender to police? Or will he force the police to shoot him down? Or will he even manage to try to take one or two with him? This is the question. That's where Vladimir Putin is right now, or will be shortly. Throw down your gun and come out with your hands up. What will he do? How crazy is he? Okay, now let's look at the other side, the other conflict in the world. Today there's a front page story on the Wall Street Journal by Don Lieber and Shania Race, why the fighting in Gaza won't stop. Neither Israel nor Hamas seem ready to end the war. More than 60,000 Palestinians have been killed inside Israel. Polls show a majority of Israelis say it's time for the war to end. Many exhausted Israeli soldiers agree, but nevertheless, the fight goes on. Why? Look inside the newspaper. William Galston is one of the stable of regular columnists at the Wall Street Journal. Of all of them, Mr. Galston, I note, is the most sympathetic to the Democratic Party. He has written columns supportive of people like Barack Obama and Joe Biden from time to time. On the other hand, Galston also was the one who wrote a couple of columns that were so informative and interesting that I saved concerning just exactly what DEI really is. And he takes it apart bone by bone. So Galston, although I do not always agree with him, is certainly somebody whom I respect. Today, the headline of his column is very, very telling. Hamas will never surrender. Remember a little while I was ago I was talking about, well, think about Vladimir Putin. How crazy is he? Now, William Galston is devoting his column today to the question, how crazy is Hamas? Because once again, you have this disparate distribution of power. The West and the Western Alliance are far stronger than Russia. Israel and the Israeli army are far stronger than Hamas. This we know, particularly now that Hamas support their guarantor of money and weapons and everything, Iran, is no longer able to help them. Let's begin with the obvious, Galston says. Hamas is a Jew-hating terrorist organization sworn to the destruction of Israel. In its attack on October 7, 2023, it intended to trigger a wider war in which Iran and its proxies, especially Hezbollah, would open new fronts and overwhelm Israel's defenses. This strategy backfired spectacularly. Hezbollah's leaders have been killed, its military capacity has been weakened, and its influence on Lebanese politics has been reduced. Israel and U.S. bombing campaigns have neutralized Iran's air defenses and set back its nuclear program. The collapse of Syria's Assad regime pulled out the linchpin in Iran's so-called Shia Crescent, which stretched from Iran to the Mediterranean. For the moment, Israel enjoys significant power over this entire region. The question now is how Israel can convert its military gains into political agreements that can end the threat to its existence and enhance its security. This is why the choice it faces in Gaza is fateful. On Meet the Press on Sunday, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina outlined one of Israel's options. I think Israel's come to conclude that they can't achieve a goal of ending the war with Hamas that would be satisfactory to the safety of Israel. And they're going to have to do in Gaza what we did in Berlin and Tokyo. What Graham was referring to, World War II, when the Allies agreed on a fundamental aim, the unconditional surrender of the Axis powers. Coexistence with the Nazi regime in Germany and the imperialistic militarists in Japan was unthinkable. Democracy would never be safe, peace never secure, as long as these groups maintained power. You couldn't have Hitler and Tojo running anything. The demand for unconditional surrender may have prolonged the war. Without the destruction of Dresden, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki, the Axis powers might never have surrendered. Once they did, the victors faced little guerrilla resistance. The political reconstruction of Germany and Japan was possible only because of the Allies' prolonged occupation of defeated foes' territory. This is where Mr. Graham's historical analogy becomes troubling. It is now clear that unlike Japan and Germany, Hamas will never surrender. Using civilians as human shields, they are prepared to fight to the last Palestinian in Gaza. This is the point that I was making yesterday and in other programs here. Galston is not of my political bent, but he sees the same thing I see. He sees it clearly, and he states it here. Hamas is prepared to fight to the last Palestinian in Gaza. 60,000 Palestinians dead in Gaza. That's Hamas' fault. Hamas did that. The blockade that Israel began in March was designed to force the issue. With Prime Minister Netanyahu's recent decision to allow a greater flow of food and medical supplies into Gaza, this strategy has failed. Photos of starving children have proved too much for most of Israel's leaders to withstand. Speaking of which, I looked today at Real Clear Politics, and About two-thirds of the way down today's menu, I see a sign, the New York Times fails catastrophically in Gaza. Well, you know me, I'm very interested in matters of journalism, journalistic practice. The New York Times was a great newspaper. Oh, they were capable of making mistakes. After all, they did send Walter Duranty to the Soviet Union. But nevertheless, they did purport to run a serious news organization. They no longer do. So when I see another piece about the New York Times muffing it again, I'm curious. In an astonishing correction tonight, the New York Times said that a Gaza toddler, whom it had said last week suffered from malnutrition, in fact had other pre-existing health problems. But this vaguely worded correction does not explain a far more serious problem. As part of the article, the paper ran a huge photo that seems to show this little boy dying of malnutrition, but it excluded his brother, who was clearly of normal weight. The Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs published the second photo on its Instagram account. Its authenticity has not been questioned. Israel also reported the boy has cerebral palsy. Children with cerebral palsy frequently have difficulty feeding themselves and are undernourished. In its correction, the Times neither apologized for nor explained how its reporters had failed to determine that this boy, Mohammed Zakaria El-Matawak, was obviously sick, nor did it explain why the paper chose to run a photo that excluded his brother. The Times must now face questions that go way far past how it depicted one child. Food deliveries in Gaza have been stymied and difficult since May, when Israel shifted much of the responsibility for providing aid to a new group, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. But Israelis, Gazans, and aid organizations are at odds, to say the least, over whether Gaza is truly near famine. The Times article was crucial in pushing the narrative of a true crisis of malnutrition and even starvation forward. It led me to write my own piece headlined, "Israel is responsible for the food crisis in Gaza." The core problem for the Times isn't just that the story had so much impact and now has been revealed to be at least partly false. It's the way pieces like this are reported. I can guarantee Times reporters weren't just wandering through Gaza looking for sick or hungry kids. A reporter who wants to document a possible famine in a war zone talks to the hospitals or health authorities, caring for the sickest children. Yet in the end, the Times featured a picture of a child whose malnutrition is at least partly due to his medical conditions. Was that the only malnourished infant the Times could find? If so, Gaza must be considerably further from food insecurity than Israel's critics have claimed. The Times needs to come clean about how it found this family and child, what vetting it did, how its reporters could possibly have believed this condition was entirely due to lack of food, given his brother's normal appearance, and why it didn't include a photograph of his brother. Going forward, the Times needs to be, at a minimum, more skeptical of Hamas claims instead of furthering them with serious consequences for Israel. In other words, yesterday, in response to a caller who inferred that much of the information he was getting was pro-Israel propaganda, I say to him, no, most of the information you're getting is pro-Hamas propaganda, up to and including from the pages of the New York Times. And this is important. The pen really is mightier than the sword. And to the extent that this propaganda successfully convinces people that the Gazans are suffering and that it's Israel's fault. The Gazans are suffering. I agree with that. And it is Hamas' fault. They're the ones responsible for this. These are the ones that Mr. Golson described as wanting to fight to the last dead Palestinian. They're human shields. Photos of starving children have proved too much for most of Israel's leaders to withstand. President Trump on Sunday said these images were terrible and that Israel had to make a decision on Gaza. The next day, Mr. Trump toughened his stance, insisting, contrary to President Netanyahu, that there is real starvation, and announcing increased cooperation with Europe to relieve it. In other words, one of the people who is being affected by this propaganda is the President of the United States. Despite playing down the humanitarian crisis in his public statements, Mr. Netanyahu clearly is unwilling to preside over the starvation of Gaza's population. He reportedly bypassed extremists in his cabinet to expand opportunities for the delivery of vital supplies. This course correction is unlikely to be his last. Occupation of Gaza would likely prove untenable in the long term. We had a caller yesterday who was recommending this. Said that Israel's mistake was they never should have surrendered control of Gaza in the first place. Given what has happened there since, and given what Hamas has done with Gaza, there's a lot to be said for that statement. But what has happened has happened. And the question is, would a reoccupation of Gaza by Israel now be feasible or desirable? It would exert huge pressure on Israel's reserve-based military forces, and the Israeli Defense Forces would face a steady stream of casualties at the hands of fanatical guerrilla fighters. This would be urban warfare at its worst. Hamas emerging from their tunnels to kill a sentry or attack a small group of soldiers gathered to have a smoke and a cold drink. This is how Hamas fights. They don't stand in battle. They're cowards. The cheap shot, the sucker punch, the hide behind the skirts of innocent civilians. That's Hamas. They're the kind of villains that you see in movies and you're disgusted by them. By their unwillingness to do anything other than fight dirty, and by their utter cowardice. The parents of IDF soldiers in Gaza wouldn't tolerate this indefinitely. Neither would the Israeli public. Remember, Israel is a democracy. Hamas doesn't have to worry about public opinion. If somebody decides they don't like what Hamas does, Hamas kills them. Mr. Netanyahu has no Israeli blood on his hands. Indeed, he has been removed from power more than once by the people of his country, when elections went against his party, and he found himself out of office, outside looking in. At present, he is once again in office, but that isn't going to be a permanent state of affairs. And the coalition he heads in the Knesset is rather unruly. How do you reconcile members who are utterly committed to the destruction of Hamas down to the last terrorist, and those who are saying, gee, the price is too high. We can't do this. It's not possible. Public opinion about the main aim of the war has shifted. In January of 2024, 3 months after the war started, 51% of Israelis said bringing home the hostages should be the main goal. 36% said toppling Hamas should be the main goal. This April, so that's a little over a year later, the number who say that the priority should be bringing back the hostages has gone from 51% to 68%. The number wanting the destruction of Hamas has shrunk from 36% down to 28%. Israelis are growing more doubtful that these two objectives are compatible. Finally, the diplomatic costs of an indefinite occupation of Gaza would be high. Increased cooperation with Saudi Arabia would be off the table. It would be harder to expand the Abraham Accords. Israel has other fish to fry in the Middle East. Israel's response to the October 7th attack has strengthened his hand in the region and ended Hamas' ability to threaten its security. Rather than wait for an unconditional surrender that will never come, Mr. Netanyahu should declare victory and accept a ceasefire that returns all of the remaining hostages and withdraws the IDF from Gaza. Once again, this is what William Galston is urging him to do. And I'm wondering about this. Mr. Netanyahu should declare victory. Declaring victory when you haven't won one is a dangerous piece of self-delusion. And when you're in politics, it strikes to your credibility, which is an important thing. In the business of politics, your credibility, whether you can be taken at your word, whether your word is good, this is important. For years, people used to make jokes about Bob Dole, the Senate Republican leader. But once a poll was taken among senators, including Democrats, who's the most popular senator? Bob Dole. One of the reasons was his sense of humor. People enjoyed his wisecracks and jokes, but the other was his integrity. All senators, Republican and Democratic, knew that if Bob Dole said, "We have a deal," and shook your hand, that you could take it to the bank. That's important. That kind of a reputation, well, it makes you popular. Why? Because people know they can depend on you. People respect you. Look at Joe Biden in office, telling everybody the border was secure when it obviously wasn't. This was just one of the reasons that he lost respect among people, was because he was trying to tell them something that was visibly false. Bibi Netanyahu does not go around hawking nonsense. He can't. His electoral position in Israel is not utterly secure. He's, as I said, he's been voted out of office more than once. If he loses his reputation for being a straight talker, might as well cut his own throat. So declaring victory where there is none, that would be problematic. Mr. Galston rather cavalierly says, yes, just declare victory and accept a ceasefire that returns all the remaining hostages. Now, what would that look like? Hamas has made it clear for some time now that returning the hostages is the last thing in the world they intend to do. Is it simply out of meanness? Do they just want to have 50 or so? Well, of course, now most of them are dead. What are they doing to the corpses? Dismemberment? Cannibalism? God knows. But they still have 20 or so living hostages that they can torture and mistreat on a daily basis. Is that what is motivating them? Insofar as policy is concerned, if Hamas were to return the hostages, how would Israel be able to maintain a war effort against them? 68%, was it, of the Israeli public, more than two-thirds, a huge majority, say that getting the hostages back is the thing we're fighting for. That's what we want. What if Hamas used that? What if Hamas said, okay, here's your hostages back? At that point, the pressure on Israel for a ceasefire becomes literally irresistible. But what kind of a ceasefire is it going to be? Will Hamas ask to be given... Well, obviously, they would want, once again, control over Gaza. They would want to be able to use the Palestinians there as basically their slaves. They would begin rebuilding their tunnels. You've got to hand it to these people. They're determined. Their goal is to kill Jews and destroy Israel. And by God, nothing in the world gets between them and that. That's all they think of. I've already made the point on the program. They want that more than they love their children. They strap bombs to their children and send them out to kill Jews. Doesn't that tell you something? You're dealing with people. Remember earlier I was asking the question, how crazy is he? How crazy are they? They are bone-ass crazy. They are nuts. They are not rational. And that makes them extremely dangerous. I've got to admit that there have been times when I have thought, looking at this very, very coldly, very, very analytically, and I've thought, it's a good thing Hamas doesn't return the hostages, because as long as they don't, the Israelis have a rationale to continue coming after them and ferreting them out and killing them, which is what they desperately need. Hamas desperately needs to be killed. And by holding the hostages, that's what they motivate. So actually, Hamas is actively promoting its own destruction by holding the hostages. What if they were ever to suffer from one glimmer of rationality? And say, oh, hey, maybe if we give back the hostages, we get a ceasefire, a real ceasefire. The Israeli people will insist on it. Once again, how crazy are they? 2 minutes break, and then we go to the, okay, 2 minutes break. It is 9:38 in the morning. Let's see here. I have got to find my ads. Where is they? Oh, there we go.
Cannabis is one of nature's most beneficial plants, and at Treehouse Dispensary, we use it to build community. In addition to dispensing cannabis and education, Treehouse hosts First Friday events every month that feature our community's local artists, makers, and activists. If you're 21 plus, join us at 3651 Soquel Drive every First Friday from 5 to 8 p.m. to enjoy the work of local artists and musicians, find one-of-a-kind gifts, and learn more about the top cannabis products in California. See you soon.
I've got a question for you. Do you want a lower car payment just by making a phone call? You know, most people buy a car and they pay whatever the car dealer says their interest rate is, and they forget about it and make payments. But did you know there is in your contract that allows another company to refinance any car payment to try and lower it? It's true. There is indeed a company out there that knows the ins and, more importantly, the outs on car loans, and they know how to lower your current car payments. It's easy and fast, and you could have a lower car payment next month. Make this free call right now and find out if you could lower your existing car payment. Call the Car Savings Hotline right now. The call is free.
Call now, 800-471-4435, 800-471-4435, 800-471-4435. That's 800-471-4435.
You never get a second chance to make a good first impression. When you want to make a good first impression, start with Dynamic Press Angelo.
Dynamic Press can take care of every printing need, from business cards to stationery, apparel, mailings, brochures, everything but money.
When you want to make a good first impression, start with Dynamic Press in Santa Cruz.
479-7920. dynamicpress.com.
Okay, at 9:41, we continue our discussion in this. I've often made the point that when you go to Real Clear Politics, you will find, cheek by jowl, articles on the same subject from a different viewpoint. Now, I have shared with you William Galston's piece today, Hamas Will Never Surrender. This appeared in the Wall Street Journal today. It also is to be found on Real Clear Politics. I'm looking at it right now. Just above it is another article from Foreign Affairs by Zaha Hassan. Netanyahu is spoiling the chance for a Mideast peace. Now, how does Zaha Hassan come to that conclusion? And Foreign Affairs, remember, this is a very reputable publication. So what are they pushing here? Following Israel and the U.S. attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities and subsequent Iranian-Israeli ceasefire, another agreement seemed to be close at hand, this time in Gaza. Well, I don't know. I have a problem with their first sentence. The others actually did happen, but there was no reason to believe that this would cause peace to be close at hand in Gaza. Late last week, however, both the United States and Israel halted their participation in negotiations, accusing Hamas of a lack of coordination and good faith. Hamas, the Islamist organization and de facto authority in the Gaza Strip, wants the United States to guarantee that the ceasefire will become permanent, Israel to withdraw its military, and the UN and other aid providers to surge humanitarian assistance to Palestinians who are facing starvation. Okay, there you have it all in the first paragraph. Hamas is described as an Islamist organization. They are a terrorist organization, which we all know. They want the United States to guarantee a ceasefire will become permanent. In other words, the United States will tell Israel, you may not attack Hamas. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to happen. Israel to withdraw its military, and the UN and other providers to surge humanitarian assistance. Once again, Hamas wants to be placed in control of food, water, fuel, medicine, all the other things that the Palestinians need so that they can, A, keep what they want, and then B, sell this aid to the Palestinians. This is how Hamas abuses their own people. I've talked about how they use them as human shields, but they also expect them to pay for aid that Israel, when it distributes aid in Gaza, it's free. They don't expect anybody to pay them. Needless to say, Mr. Hassan in Foreign Affairs doesn't say a word about that. Well, let's go a little further into this screed. U.S. President Trump's continued deference to Israel and his withdrawal from the talks are a huge mistake. Hamas walked away from the talks, you lying, stinking son of a... Unless a deal can be made, Trump's desire to preside over a broader regional peace that includes normalization of relations between Israel and Arabia will be dead in the water. Such a comprehensive regional agreement is desperately needed after 21 months of death and destruction. I frankly think that the Saudis are not going to allow Hamas to stand in the way of what is in their best interests. The only way that would happen, it would have nothing to do with a reckoning concerning Israel. It would have to do with whether the Saudi royal family would feel in physical danger, not from Israel. Israel has no designs on the Saudi royal family, but Hamas would. When Anwar Sadat signed peace with Israel in 1979, it was an outfit like Hamas that had him murdered. Any Muslim who accepts the existence of Israel and deals with Jews and the Jewish state, who conducts real negotiations, like normal human beings, that's a death sentence, so far as Hamas is concerned. And that would be the only thing I can see that would prevent the Saudi royal family from joining the Abraham Accords, is if they are afraid that if they were to do so, they would be signing their own death warrant. Again, not at the hands of Israel, but the hands of Muslim fanatics. And that's exactly who Hamas is. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and his ultra-nationalist governing coalition. Good Lord. Just reading this, it is obvious ultra-nationalist governing coalition have not shown any signs they are ready to prioritize a durable peace. Even if the remaining Israeli hostages held by Hamas are released, Netanyahu has emphasized an end to the war is impossible until Hamas is completely disarmed and its leaders exiled. That is the proper stance. But I'm asking, is it possible? I mean, Netanyahu is bright enough to understand this. But would his governing coalition hold together if he were to insist on it? Well, of course, the only way to find out would be for Hamas to take the step of releasing their hostages. Let's give it a try, see what happens. But that's not going to happen. It would be interesting. I really would. I would pay money to see what would happen then. I'd buy a ticket to that show. What if Hamas were to send back their 20 live and 30 dead hostages and say, here, we're no longer in the hostage-keeping business. You can have your people back. I can't help but believe that even if Mr. Netanyahu wanted to carry on a campaign of elimination against Hamas, he would be unable to do so. Politically unable to do so. And not because of pressure from the United States or from any other nation, but from domestic political realities inside Israel. Those are the people he answers to. Again, he is not like Hamas. He did not shoot himself into power. He got there by campaigning and winning votes, and those votes can just as easily go the other way. Even then, he wants Israel to maintain security over Gaza and the West Bank indefinitely. You think? Meanwhile, as Egyptian, Qatari, and U.S. mediators were shuttling back and forth between Palestinian and Israeli negotiators, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz advanced a plan for relocating Gaza's population to a so-called humanitarian city built on the ruins of Rafah near the enclave's southern edge. Under Katz's proposal, over 2 million Palestinians would be held in an area a third the size of Washington, D.C. Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, Former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert refers to this as a concentration camp. This piece in Foreign Affairs is so outrageously biased that even, I mean, granted, I have my own way of looking at this, but the sheer vitriol directed against the Israeli government and Prime Minister Netanyahu here, it goes to a level, well, we see it in the United States all the time. I would call this Netanyahu derangement syndrome. Victims of this are incapable of ever admitting that Benjamin Netanyahu could possibly be right about anything. And again, here in America, we see this very clearly on a daily basis. Trump derangement syndrome is a very real thing. We are destroying more and more homes that have nowhere to return to, Netanyahu said of Gaza's population. The only inevitable outcome will be the desire of Gazans to emigrate. Even if he were to agree to a short-term ceasefire, addressing Palestinians' right to self-determination cannot be part of any deal because he considers the notion of an independent Palestinian state to be a threat to Israel, and as the Israeli Prime Minister stated during a visit to the White House on July 7th. Well, Mr. Hassan obviously is either ignorant of or is closing his eyes deliberately to the lesson that was supplied on October 7th. Hamas is not interested in a two-state solution. This is what Hassan is talking about here. He says, oh, well, Netanyahu isn't interested in a two-state solution. The Israeli state has been in favor of a two-state solution ever since 1947. The original creation of Israel by the United Nations mandate back in 1947 was a two-state solution. The territory was divided, I think it was about 55-45. Close to evenly, not quite. Israel actually got the short end of the stick, the less desirable territory. But the Israelis said, that's okay, we'll take the deal. We're good. Two-state solution is good. It was the Arabs who said, hell no, and immediately launched a war of extermination against Israel. And for the first time in what became, over the years, a successive program of Israeli military success in defense of themselves, the Israelis prevailed. And much of what had been designated as Palestine reverted to Israeli control. And Arabs left and refugee camps were set up. Those refugee camps, incidentally, that were set up in 1948, they're still there. You say, wait a minute, people don't live that long. If adults were put in a refugee camp in 1948, they must be dead now. They are. They're all dead. Just like everybody who ever heard Bix Beiderbecke blow a note is dead. Time marches on. But in these refugee camps, I mean, these are human beings. They had children, raised families. They had children, raised families. Today there are people living in refugee camps who have been there for literally generations, ever since 1948. Why? Because they refused to accept a two-state solution. They would rather live in refugee camps. Oh, and of course, their fellow Arabs, who could have easily resettled them. After all, Arab nations expelled Jews. Get out of here. What happened? Those Jews then went to Israel and were promptly resettled. In spite of the fact that Israel is a very small country, nevertheless, hey, a Jew coming to Israel, we've got room, welcome. We'll find a place for you. On 1% of the territory of the Middle East. The other 99% is held by the Arabs, but it's important that they keep Palestinians in refugee camps. Can't resettle them. And so to this day, those refugee camps are still there. And if you're thinking that's a hell of a way to live, by golly, I agree with you 112%. It's one of the worst examples of an utterly wasted human existence that I can think of in today's world. To spend your entire life in a refugee camp. Ew. But, once again, this is the level of commitment. You have to hate the Jews and Israel more than you love your own family, your own life, your own children. And time and again, this is brought home to us in living color. Provided you view the reality with clear eyes, which is one thing that Mr. Hassan in Foreign Affairs obviously is incapable of doing. Netanyahu's formula to end the conflict is not fit for purpose. No Arab government will entertain the forced displacement of Palestinians. Arab states that was an idea floated primarily by President Trump. And at the time, most people, including me, said, that's not going to fly. Oh, it's an attractive fantasy, but it's not going to fly. And nobody knows that better than Mr. Netanyahu. But this is the straw man that Mr. Hassan is setting up in order, in his view, or in what he's setting up here, is that Netanyahu's vision is taking all the Palestinians in Gaza and simply sending them somewhere else. A forced relocation. Arab states have made it increasingly clear they are no longer willing to deepen their ties or normalize relations with Israel until Israel accepts a sovereign Palestinian state. They've been willing to do that right along. But the Hamas and the PLO do not find that congenial. They will accept no Palestinian state that recognizes the existence of Israel. And this is the one thing Israel insists upon. They're perfectly willing to see a Palestinian state exist, but it must be on the basis of mutual recognition. And that would seem kind of basic. After all, that was the big thing that brought Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin together at Camp David in 1979. Egypt had never recognized the right of Israel to exist. But when Sadat made that concession and was willing to actually sit down with an Israeli head of state and say, yes, you are a real human being, you represent a real country. Wow! Acknowledgement of objective reality. What a great first step. And of course, a lasting peace was concluded from that. A lasting peace could be had with the Palestinians, but only if they are willing to acknowledge the objective reality. Israel exists. And to concede that Israel's existence is real. And to recognize it. This they will not do. Or I don't know. Should I say that? That seems like a statement for forever and for the ages. This they have not done. That's a true statement. This they are not now doing. Is it possible that at some time in the future you may have Palestinians who are willing to do what Sadat did, what King Hassan of Jordan has done, what the signatures of the Abraham Accords have done, what Dubai has done, what Morocco has done? Maybe. But it's kind of like releasing the hostages. I said, try it and see what happens. But that's not going to happen. Try recognizing Israel's reality and see what happens. But they won't do that. It's 10 o'clock at SantaCruzVoice.com. Okay, for the podcaster people, the pod people, we have an interview or a presentation by Joe Biden's speechwriter. I wonder what he has to say for himself.
Hi, I'm the speechwriter for the President of the United States, Joe Biden. I know you're thinking Joe Biden makes a lot of gaffes. It must be frustrating to write his speeches, but you're wrong. Joe Biden is a brilliant orator. That's just how I do talk and type speeches, Jacko. We all know the classics. Next Snellnerent.
Donald Trump does pose an existential threat to this. It's not hypothetical.
My bus been wet.
My bus been wet.
True international pressure.
True international pressure.
A lot of people laugh at these moments, but I don't get it. I mean, he nailed it. Didn't even rehearse or nothing. One take Biden, I call him. I really thought True international pressure was going to throw him for a loop, but nope. He's speaking a word from his teeth hole, lickety-splat. Sometimes I get writer's block, but I always find creative ways to keep the juices flowing. Classic Biden, every time. Never fails. There was one day I was working on a speech, I don't know about what, nothing important, something about jobs, who cares, when the muse struck me, much like how I imagine she struck Michelangelo when he made David. Corn Pop. Who was Corn Pop? What kind of dudes did he run? Was his razor clean or was it rusty? I just started writing. The words flowed from me like an arched stream to a urinal. Was Corn Pop a good dude? No. In fact, he was not. That's my Sgt. Pepper's.
If it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to...
It's one of mine.
Anyway.
Does it annoy me that Biden gets all the credit for my Brilla Smart Think writing? Maybe a little bit. But he's the Prez, you know? I take pride that my writing has placed him in the ranks of other famous Prez remarks 7 years ago. Ask not what your country can do for you. And because of me, lying dog-faced pony soldier. I'm sorry. I have something in my eye.
What about stuff like if you don't vote for me, you ain't black, or when he recently referred to someone as a Negro?
That's not me. Don't put that on me. That's all Biden. That's not me.
Oh my God. That is so funny. I burst out laughing. This guy, there's visual to go along with these. You got most of it by being able to hear what the guy was saying and referring to Biden's malapropisms. And I wrote that. I mean, the concept is funny. But to watch this guy actually, the way they depicted him, and to watch him working at his computer, pouring coffee into his computer, using his toes on the see it. Joe Biden's speechwriter takes credit for Biden gaffes. Look on YouTube, Babylon Bee. You can see this. It goes by in, well, you heard it yourself. What, 3.5, 4 minutes, something like that? Just a few. Actually, less than that. Less than 3 minutes. But gracious golly, it's funny. And of course, you'll want to send it to your friends, and so on, just so that they'll get a yuck too. But golly, what a amazing. These guys are geniuses. They really are. The best satire in the world today is not being done on Saturday Night Live or any other television. Of course, you used to have some great skit programs on television. Mad TV was good. In Living Color with Keenan Ivory Wayans. Great stuff. I wonder if you can still get those on internet. I'm going to look up and see. YouTube. Let's check it out. And I am going to put in Living Color and see what comes up. Oh, In Living Color, Homie the Clown, Jim Carrey, full episodes, Men on Film. Oh, God, that's funny. Fire Marshal Bill. Yeah, absolutely, it's here. Well, if you want to see some great skit comedy, great sketch comedy, rather, there you go. Thank God for the internet. Where would we go for yucks if it weren't? Okay. Time to get ready to go back to work. That means I need to do that. Okay, still got another 30 seconds before we reconnect. So where do we go from here? Hi, ho, do, do. Where do we go from here? Okay. I have got some other things to go ahead with. Ha 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 ha. Welcome once again to the Charles Freedman radio program, News Talk, from 9 to noon every weekday here on Santa Cruz Voice. The telephone number to reach the program, 831-265-5050, 265-5050. We have another hour devoted to the issues of life and death, really. These wars, the one in Ukraine, the one in Gaza. President Trump was elected not that long ago with an avowed desire to end both these conflicts. He is working toward that goal. But sometimes you get the idea, like he's trying to square the circle. Is it that he has set a goal that is really unattainable? In order for war to end, both sides have to stop fighting. And if Hamas won't, then how do you end the war? I'll leave you with that question and we'll move on to some other things. A couple of months ago when President Trump announced his... Oh, hey, we've got a phone call. Up, there we go. Mark is on the line. And it says here his topic is California schools. Mark, are you for them or against them?
Well, I used to sit in them, but I'd like to be for them.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if we could be? I mean, schools. Shouldn't that be something that we feel good about? But not today.
Yeah. No. Interested in your earlier topic, kind of related to it. Tom Lehrer passed away.
Yes.
And he was an instructor up at UCSC, but his fame came from his folk songs. And related to what you were talking about earlier, you should play National Brotherhood Week.
I think I can do that. Hang on just a second, and we'll bring that one. I did play a couple of Tom Lehrer things yesterday, but I don't think that was one of the ones I chose. So let's. He did a bunch of them, and
oh yeah,
yeah. Poisoning Pigeons in the Park is one of my own favorites, but National Brotherhood Week. Okay, our policy here of playing requests for our listeners. We're going to go ahead and play National Brotherhood Week for our audience. There are several different versions of it here. I think this is the one that we'll use. Well, wait a minute. I'd like to get the one from his original. No, that's Lobachevsky. National Brotherhood. Okay. Let's use this one. Looks pretty good. Okay, here we go. Here we don't go. There's an ad here. Cancel the ad.
This is just one of many such weeks honoring various worthy causes. One of my favorites is National Make Fun of the Handicapped Week, which Frank Fontaine and Jerry Lewis are in charge of, as you know. During National Brotherhood Week, various special events are arranged to drive home the message of brotherhood. This year, for example, on the first day of the week, Malcolm X was killed, which gives you an idea of how effective the whole thing is. I'm sure we all agree that we ought to love one another, and I know there are people in the world who do not love their fellow human beings, and I hate people like that. Here's a song about National Brotherhood Week. Oh, the white folks hate the black folks, and the black folks hate the white folks. To hate all but the right folks is an old established rule, but during National Brotherhood Week, National Brotherhood Week, Lena Horne and Sheriff Clark are dancing cheek to cheek. It's fun to eulogize the people you despise, as long as you don't let them in your school. Oh, the poor folks hate the rich folks, and the rich folks hate the poor folks. All of my folks hate all of your folks. It's American as apple pie. But during National Brotherhood Week, National Brotherhood Week, New Yorkers love the Puerto Ricans 'cause it's very chic. Step up and shake the hand of someone you can't stand. You can tolerate him if you try. Oh, the Protestants hate the Catholics, and the Catholics hate the Protestants, and the Hindus hate the Muslims, and everybody hates the Jews. But during National Brotherhood Week, it's national everyone smile at one anotherhood week. Be nice to people who are inferior to you. It's only for a week, so have no fear. Be grateful that it doesn't last all year.
Okay, Mark, there is your request. I hope you heard it as well. Everybody else did, that's for darn sure. Thank you for that request. Mark, are you there?
I'm here. Very topical, huh?
Oh, yeah. That was recorded decades ago, but it lives on. Mark, are you there?
Yeah, Charlie. There's some feedback there.
Well, I don't know. I'm not getting. You're coming over very faintly, but.
Let me hang up and I'll call back.
All right, fair enough. I'll be happy to take that call. We'll see if we can get a better connection. In the meantime, once again, thank you for the request. Happy to play National Brotherhood Week by Tom Lehrer. I became familiar with him, oh God, when I was in high school, I guess, maybe something like that. He was doing recordings back then. He died day before yesterday at the age of 97. 97, wow, quite a run. Okay, Mark is now following through on his promise to call back, and let's find out if he's there. Good morning, sir.
Can you read me now?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. Now, a very topical song, especially the last chorus. But, yeah, I don't know. But it sure sums up current events, 40 years later.
Oh, well, as we've talked about on this program, the one group of people who, for all of human history, has been loathed, despised, and persecuted more than any other are the Jewish people. There's no question about this.
The reason I called it California schools, we talk about Santa Cruz County schools and Pajaro Valley Unified School District. They've lost 2,200 students out of enrollment. But at the same time, they've hired 20 full-time administrators, additional administrators. So enrollment's going down. Teachers are being laid off, but administrators, they're increasing. And this goes through all the schools within the county, but Pajaro Valley is the most extreme on this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they're asking, why is the need for the administrators? And they said, expanded behavioral health services. So the kids need behavioral health. Well, I think they need math and English more than behavioral health. But one thing that came about, and this was statewide, is the state of California Department of Education launched something called the Universal Meals Program. And it mandates that through K through 12, schools provide breakfast and lunch to all students, not just low-income students, all students. So if Bill Gates' kids are sitting next to your kids in school, they're getting a free lunch.
Mark, let me explain this to you. What you're seeing here is a function of bureaucracy in action. The preservation of its prerogatives. We look at places like Oakland and Chicago where there are schools whose enrollment has declined to a terribly small number, and yet these schools remain open. They don't simply close the school and send the few remaining students to another school where they would be able to interact with other people their own age, etc. The educational system, the public schools, are no longer being run for the benefit of students. That is not the priority. The public education system today is being run for the benefit of itself, its own bureaucracy. You talked about how they need fewer teachers now, but more administrators. Why? Well, for a long time, having been in the educational establishment myself, I can tell you this firsthand. If you choose teaching, education as a career, you're like anybody else. You would like to advance in your career. You would like to be promoted. You would like to make more money. I'm sure that you have been promoted and had your income increase as time has gone by in your career working in agriculture. This is a normal thing. But the problem is that in education, this has taken the bent. If you're a school teacher, what you want to do is get out of the classroom, because school teachers are the bottom rung of the pyramid of the education bureaucracy. You get a position as a school teacher, a classroom teacher, if you do a reasonably good job, if you get good reviews, etc., you get promoted. How do you get promoted? You get removed from the classroom and put into an administrative position. Here you get a higher salary and a lesser workload, so you're making out greatly. In terms of this business with the meals, schools are attempting to justify their own existence in a time when, for reasons of both declining student populations and people seeking alternatives, many people are dissatisfied with the quality of the public schools. They look for private schools. They do homeschooling. They're taking their kids out. And, of course, this if your funding comes from average daily attendance, then if you have fewer warm bodies showing up, you're getting less money. That won't do. So what do? You say, well, we'll feed them all. And now, when I was a kid, we had a cafeteria at John C. Fremont Elementary School. We had a cafeteria at every public school I ever attended. When you went to the cafeteria, you'd have your lunch money, 35 cents or whatever, and you'd buy your lunch. Or you could bring your own lunch from home. Either one, fine, and you had a clean, safe place there where you could eat your lunch. Well, now the education bureaucracy, in seeking to perpetuate its existence and promote its welfare, they're moving into the food service business, because they botched the education business. They're trying to turn this into a food service business once again, simply for the purpose of attracting additional people. They figure, hey, if you give them something to eat, maybe they'll show up. It's all very understandable at a very low level of human what do I want to say? Progress and achievement. It's all, unfortunately, it's set up for itself and not for the benefit of the students who are supposed to benefit. That's the outrageous thing about it.
Well, Charlie, I've watched this develop. And when I went to elementary school in California way back when, elementary schools did not have cafeterias.
Mine did.
Something you got in junior high. Yeah, mine did not. So everyone brought their own lunch.
It was in a Quonset hut.
But the issue, so years ago, the state came in and said, well, we want to provide free lunch to the lower income students. They should have a free lunch so, they'll education will go well because they're nourished. And that went, and then they decided in their infinite wisdom, well, we should do free breakfast. So we need a free breakfast. And what was happening were the kids were playing out on the playground before school, and they were not going in for their free breakfast. They'd rather play with their friends and skip breakfast. So the administrators saw this, and they said, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to serve the low-income kids free breakfast in homeroom. So the first class of the day, the lower-income students would have breakfast brought into them in the homeroom. Well, what happened was they were subject to derision in that, oh, you're a low income kid, you're a poor kid because you're getting breakfast while I'm sitting here doing my schoolwork. So to eliminate that, they said, well, everyone will get free lunch, free breakfast. So your homeroom now is everyone eating breakfast and no educational process going into it. But what I bring this up for, one, you kind of hit on it, it's making families dependent upon the state because, hey, I got to pay taxes and increase taxes because the state feeds my kids. And, it's a great deal. But what I see wrong in this is when I was a kid, Mom made me lunch, and off I went to school with my Roy Rogers lunchbox and had a bologna sandwich and a cookie, maybe. And off we went. And, one day I went and I had a butter sandwich, no meat. And I went to Mom. My mom said, oh, I forgot. Well, no, we didn't have anything in the refrigerator, so she made me a butter sandwich. Well, such is life. But when my kids, who've gone on, I took great pride in making them lunch. I got up earlier, and I made lunch for them. And when they came home that evening, I'd ask, "Hey, how'd you enjoy lunch? Good, bad, whatever." But what's interesting in this, I have a relative I'm not going to mention who is involved in the reentry, runs the reentry program for incarcerated people coming back into society. So they get out of prison, they come to a sort of like a halfway house or whatever, set up, and they get reintroduced into society. They get a job, a day job, or whatever. And the comment made, and it was very universal with the women going through this program, is they did not know how to cook. And so my relative would take them to the grocery store, hand them $50 at the door, go in, buy groceries, come back out, give me the change, and we're going to go back, and you're going to make a meal. And this was an educational process for them. And you had to understand, these women growing up as kids, they did not sit down Sunday for an evening meal. They didn't sit down any evening for evening meal, a family get-together, how's life going? How's school going? How's this and that? They didn't have that interaction, and off they went into a life of crime. And I'm stating that's a common thread because for them, Dad was in jail, Mom was doing God knows what, and they were on their own to go down to McDonald's or whatever or 7-Eleven and buy something to eat. And I find that the public education process is interfering with what it means to be a family. And family is feeding your kids. And, if my kids were in school right now, I'd say, hell no, I'm going to make you breakfast. I'm going to make you lunch, and you don't eat that crap. And, you interact with me and my desire to nourish you, but my desire, to be your parent. So anyhow, I'm off on a soapbox, but I think it's horrific what they're doing, but I can understand why they're doing it.
Well, you're getting into the control angle of it, which I see, and that's there too. But I think that even more important is the self-perpetuation. Bureaucracies exist to maintain themselves. And one of the most parasitic bureaucracies we have, unfortunately, among us today is public education. And it's taken the position where the educational establishment exists for the benefit of the educational establishment. And to hell with the students. We really don't care about them all that much. They're simply viewed as a means to an end.
Yeah, and we can see that with standardized test scores. They're horrific, and the teachers don't seem to care. They're focusing now locally on ethnic studies. And no, reading, math, get back to that. I don't give a darn. Let the kids learn how to read, and they can read about ethnic studies. But but anyhow, it's disappointing to see this schools providing breakfast and lunch now for the kids. And to me, it's going to come to no good end. And thanks for playing Tom Lehrer. I've always enjoyed National Brotherhood Week, and it's very, very pertinent to what's going on in the world at this time.
Not at all. Happy to fulfill that request for you. Have a great day, and thanks for the call.
Thanks, Charles.
Let me see. 10:26. Yeah, sure. Let's go ahead and grab our commercial break, and then we shall be returning for more. Perhaps when we get back after these 2 minutes, we'll be talking with you. We will be if you call 831-265-5050.
The Scotts Valley Chamber of Commerce presents the 25th Annual Scotts Valley Art, Wine, and Beer Festival, August 16th and 17th at Sky Park in Scotts Valley. 2 days of fun for the whole family with food, fine art, a kids' fun zone, and live music, including the Joint Chiefs and the Lost Boys featuring James Durbin. Join us Saturday for the Cops and Rodders Car Show with over 100 vintage cars on display. And don't miss Dog Day Sunday with contests for all canines. All this and free admission to the Scotts Valley Art, Wine, and Beer Festival. See you there.
You need a clean, pleasant space to conduct business, but you don't want the burden of a long, expensive lease. Your solution is Satellite Co-working and Digital Media Studio on Soquel Avenue. Satellite offers private offices, meeting and conference rooms, even co-working by the hour, day, week, or month. Schedule a tour at satellitecoworking.com. Mention Santa Cruz Voice for 20% off your first reservation.
Get hooked up with affordable cannabis at the locally owned Hook Outlet. The Hook is a friendly neighborhood outlet where everybody above the age of 21 can have access to the best cannabis products for the best prices in the county. Get friendly local service and great prices in person and online at the Hook Outlets in Capitola and Watsonville. Order online at hookoutlet.com and pick up 9 to 9, 7 days a week. Get hooked up at the locally owned Hook Outlet.
Hi, folks. How many of you out there love to garden? Wouldn't it be nice to grow some of your own food? Or maybe a flower garden would brighten your day. All you need is the Knox Garden Box, a heavily constructed, portable, elevated garden on legs that can virtually change the way you've gardened in the past. The Knox Garden Box can be set up anywhere. Yes, you can place it right on concrete at knoxgardenbox.com. That's KNOX, gardenbox.com.
Okay, welcome back. 831-265-5050, the telephone number here on the Charles Freedman radio program. I'd like now to turn a little examination towards some of the domestic policies and actions of the Trump administration. A few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, I guess it was, Trump announced Liberation Day, and this was, all of these tariffs, just a monumental ton of trade impediments. On my program, I said that this was another example of misnomer. I called it Conflagration Day. Since that time, many of the dire predictions of myself and others have not come around, and we've been reviled, and, you were wrong. Well, we don't really know because, in all fairness, Mr. Trump has moved goalposts and has moved his policies. He has backed away from the draconian tariff regime that he laid out on Liberation Day and instead is going about doing things in a different way. Is it going to work? So far, it looks like a fairly good set of results, but we don't know yet. This is one of those things where until, I would say, the end of the year, December, New Year's, by that time, I think we'll be able to get a fair idea. The United States of America, remember, the American economy is, like the Queen Mary. It's huge. You don't turn it on a dime. You don't start or stop it on a dime. Actions taken that affect the economy have a delay impact. But they do have an impact. And so, this is the kind of thing we can come back to. And obviously, I'm still anticipate doing this program at the end of the year. We'll talk about that. But right now, let's talk about something else. There's a new Liberation Day. And this one really is a Liberation Day. Mr. Trump and his EPA have now repealed a Biden-era regulation that was of tremendous importance and was tremendously deleterious in its effect. The EPA, on Tuesday, declared Liberation Day from climate imperialism by moving to repeal the 2009 so-called endangerment finding for greenhouse gas emissions. This will make it harder for the feds to dictate what kind of car or lawnmower you can buy, among other benefits. The EPA is proposing to undo what Congress never gave the agency the authority to do. This was never put into law. Regulating greenhouse gases. Bear in mind, when we're told by Gavin Newsom and others what the Republicans, what Trump wants to do, bring back smog. No. That, like so many other things the Democrats say, is sheerest twaddle. It is utterly untrue. Carbon dioxide is not smog. Carbon dioxide not only is a naturally occurring part of our atmosphere, but without it, every green plant in the world would wither and die. So in the immortal words of Al Collins, don't hand me that jazz. The Clean Air Act authorizes the EPA to regulate pollutants such as ozone, particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, hydrocarbons, others that may reasonably be anticipated to endanger public health or welfare. A 5-4 Supreme Court majority ruled in Massachusetts versus EPA that greenhouse gases could qualify as pollutants under a capacious reading of the law. Ergo, the EPA must regulate them if it finds out they endanger the public. Thus arose the Obama administration's endangerment finding that undergirds all federal climate dictates. The finding acknowledged scientific uncertainties about the effect of CO2 emissions on temperatures, weather, allergies, diseases, and more. But it cherry-picked studies to support the dubious proposition that greenhouse gases pose a clear and present danger to the public. There is some evidence, italics here, there is some evidence that elevated carbon dioxide concentration and climate change can lead to changes in aeroallergens that could increase the potential for allergenic illnesses, the finding states. There's also much evidence that CO2 has scant impact on allergies and health. I got allergies. I live on Zyrtec part of the year, but damn it, CO2 ain't one of them. Pollen, peanuts, certain other things, yeah. Not as allergic as some other people. I don't keel over, but I sneeze a lot. But CO2? That to be allergic to carbon dioxide. Wow, that would be every breath you take. Wow, that would be really dreadful. You've read about the bubble boy, I think it was. It turned out he was sensitive to everything. You remember reading about this? I do. And this young man had to be confined in this sterile environment because if he even came into impact with the outside air, he would have a violent reaction. My God, what a horrid way to live. But obviously, that is not a typical situation. The Energy Department on Tuesday published a comprehensive analysis of climate science and its uncertainties by 5 outside scientists. One is Steve Koonin, who served in the Obama administration and is contributor to these pages. The crucial point is that CO2 is different from pollutants that Congress expressly authorized EPA to regulate. Those pollutants are subject to regulatory control because they cause local problems depending on concentrations that include nuisances, odor, visibility, damage to plants, and at high enough exposure levels, toxicological effects to humans. The report notes, in contrast, CO2 is odorless, does not affect visibility, and has no toxicological effects at ambient levels. In other words, higher levels of CO2 in the air from fossil fuels will not make you sick. This is a distinction Democrats elide when they claim that increases in CO2 will cause dirtier air, President Trump is making America smoggy again, said Gavin Newsom. This is disinformation. Greenhouse gas emissions do not cause smog. Earlier, I described it as sheerest twaddle. That's the same thing. This isn't to say that the climate isn't warming or that humans don't affect the climate, but the impact of CO2 on public welfare depends on climate effects, which are uncertain and mediated by sundry other vehicles like cloud cover. With regulatory humility, EPA is acknowledging this and proposing to repeal this 2009 finding. Democrats are up in arms. The finding is a prerequisite for the EPA to regulate CO2 emissions, upon which so much of their brutal regime rests. The Obama and Biden EPAs used the endangerment finding to justify electric vehicle mandates and rules forcing the retirement of fossil fuel-fired power plants. Some leftists urged them to go further and regulate CO2 emissions from leaf blowers, lawn mowers, commercial buildings to help facilitate the use of fossil fuels. Today's first press. What do we got here? San Francisco may soon ban natural gas in residential and commercial buildings undergoing major renovations. See, they've already said if you build a new home, you cannot have gas laid on. You can only use electricity, which of course is far more expensive and far less dependable. But the law says, never mind what, professional chefs cook on, you will be cooking on an electric range. I'd like to see him try and take my wife's gas range away from her. And just between you and me, the stuff she cooks on it is really, really good. But then again, when you're from the government, you don't really care about these things. You know what you know, and you compel conformity. You will behave. You will get in line. You will obey. That sound like the kind of stuff you hear in a free country? All my life I've heard people say, well, it's a free country. When I hear that nowadays, I'm struck by the irony. It is less and less a free country. Every rule, every regulation, every page in the Federal Register that's telling us what we can and can't do makes this country just a little less free. Am I saying we should have none of this? Of course not. A civilization needs rules and regulations to live by. But there comes a time when this proliferates out of control. To call for smaller government 100 years ago was not reasonable. To call for smaller government today is essentially the only rational position to take. After all, times have changed. Democrats will sue to block the Trump repeal when it's final. That would make the administration's day. Conservatives have long wanted the Supreme Court to revisit this decision, which contravenes its major question doctrine rulings, given the enormous economic implications. Whether and how to regulate greenhouse gas emissions is for Congress to decide. This is beyond the scope of a bureaucracy. If the American people decide they want to ban the use of natural gas, well, do it. Fight an election on that issue. Let the Democrats go out and say, elect us and we will ban the use of natural gas to produce electric power or to heat your home or cook your food. Let them take this case to the voters, who are, after all, the people who are supposed to run this country. Well, of course, you say they're not going to do that. They understand that they'd lose. Well, if that's the case, then perhaps this policy should not be enacted, because the American people don't want it. But it's you're killing us. I'm sorry. The American people are not suicidal, and they're not stupid. They're not interested in ending the use of natural gas as a fuel. So stop. And stop using the regulatory state to accomplish a goal which you cannot affect through political means. That, they talk about fascism and authoritarianism. That's what it looks like. Is when you know damn well that the people don't want a policy, but you find a way to inflict it upon them anyhow. Heil. Right into Führer's face. Some Democrats say repealing the endangerment finding won't change anything because they inserted language in sections of the Inflation Promotion Act referring to greenhouse gas as air pollutants. But the IRA doesn't require or authorize the EPA to regulate greenhouse gases. Democrats couldn't do so under budget reconciliation rules. EPA Director Lee Zeldin and Energy Secretary Chris Wright deserve credit for not shrinking from this fight. So here are Trump's administration, Trump's chosen people, fighting the good fight and seeking to roll back an outrageous extension of government authority and power. This was one of Mr. Obama's big deals, and it happened right at the outset. 2009, that was the year he took power. So the first damn thing he did was declare carbon dioxide a pollutant, subject to regulation by the Environmental Protection Agency. Congress never said that. And remember, Congress at that time, this is the beginning of the Obama administration, Congress was in Democratic hands. Why did he not go to Congress and ask for this? Because he understood that even Democrats, many of them, weren't ready to go along with it. He understood that this was something he could not get through Congress. So once again, we don't care about Congress. We don't care about the people. We know what we want, and this is what we're going to do. That is authoritarianism in a pair of pants. So on this one, I think the title of Liberation Day is a fitting one. And thank you to Mr. Zeldin and Mr. Wright for this action. I would love to see the left lodge suit on this, because they would lose. Let's move on to another one. There is a reversal from the Food and Drug Administration that has taken place within the past couple of days. One of the things that I haven't talked about it that much on the program, but hey, Evan's on the line. That calls for taking his call and finding out what's on his mind today. Let's make that discovery. Hello there. Thank you for calling.
Thank you so much for having me on again. As always, I liked your other caller. He had some good points in the school system. I wouldn't 100% agree on the fact that we need kids eating in their homeroom, school, classroom. They do need to be taught. But at the same time, I would say kids need to be fed. It's healthy to have some food in your stomach, and then you could, perform better tasks at learning. But you were saying a lot of our freedoms are being taken away. I honestly feel like a lot of your Democrats, for sure, take them away. Republicans are to blame as well. But I find capitalism might undermine freedom a little bit more. We have a lot of corporate power in general here in Santa Cruz. I was just kind of reading the local Santa Cruz local.org. I guess a developer backed out 389 apartments on Ocean Street. Kind of glad to hear. Not really favorable of how the Santa Cruz County Democrats, for sure, are running our county, putting these big developers in charge of our housing. We have very limited amount of low-income housing around here, and they seem to put a very small percentage of these low-income housing in these big developments, and which I'm seeing a high rents in this town pretty soon. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, it's interesting. Evidently, a developer was just this is all new to me, so I'm going out just by what you told me. A developer was going to construct a bunch of apartments, and this has now been eliminated or stopped. Is that correct?
That's what I'm reading.
Okay.
Again, it's on SantaCruzLocal.org on July 24th.
Okay.
So we're
I
a bit.
just look. I don't need the date and everything. I just yes or no would be sufficient. So yes, I have it correct. If you want to reduce the price of a thing, the best way to do it is to provide more of it. And this is the basic law of supply and demand. And this is, this is not a law passed by Congress. This is an unbreakable law, a very real law.
I apologize. More of what? Higher rents or lower rents? Because I see higher rents than lower rents, sir.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about the commodity itself, housing. We're talking about housing here. If you want to lower the cost...
Exactly. And I see more higher rents in housing, sir. So I question you. More of what? High rents or low rents?
Okay.
I'm seeing high rents around here.
Listen for a second. More housing. You just told me that a developer was going to build a bunch of apartments. That's housing. That's more housing. Now, if you had a lot of developers building a lot of apartments, you might conceivably make an impact on the cost of housing here. The problem is demand. That's the other side of the scale. There's supply and demand. There are a lot of people who want to live in Santa Cruz because it's not just like there are a lot of people who want to live in Malibu. There are a lot of people who want to live in Marin County. There are a lot of people who want to live in Carmel. But not everybody can. Why? Because it's expensive. And when you decide, hey, I'd like to live in Santa Cruz, and you come and you see, wow, Santa Cruz is expensive, maybe I can't afford to live in Santa Cruz. And so you start looking at, Marina or Seaside or someplace like that instead, where rents are cheaper. That price, that rent, that's information. That's telling you something. It's telling you that there are a lot of people who want this housing in Santa Cruz. That's a commodity, a product. On the other, get back to this question of the guy who was going to build housing, apartments, and now he's not. Those apartments, those additional apartments, would have satisfied some of that demand. But it sounds to me as if you're celebrating the idea of him not building that. Well, if you're in favor of restricting supply, and at the same time you're saying, I want rents to go down, that's not rational. That's not economically rational. If you restrict supply, prices are going to go up.
You might not have my full evidence here of why I don't, why I agree this gentleman's, the whole thing's backing out. I don't like the fact that these real estate companies own a lot of these our property around here. What do you think? Because that's what's happening, at least on Ocean Street here. This one specific thing we're talking about here. I read into this real estate company owns this land, and then they're selling it off to this developer in which they have, and that let me get your stats, the stats here. They were going to build 389 units. Mm-hmm. So those 389 units, 54 would have been below rental market rate. So again, I question your you, sir, here, because I don't see your. You say housing. I'm looking at it as high rent housing, sir. You're not seeing your low income rents around here. You're seeing more of your market rate housing, in which that's very high, sir.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's the same as you would experience if you went to, again, a place like Carmel or a place like Piedmont. There are places where wealthy people live. Beverly Hills. And you can't afford to live there. And you know what? Neither can I.
Do you think the policies were, and I apologize for interrupting. No, you're 100% correct. There are certain areas where it's going to be high. I may have to go ahead and start moving out of town here in the next 10 years if this Santa Cruz is going to start building up more of these high rent housing units. And then, that we're supposed to be helping out our Hispanic community since the 1970s. It just doesn't seem very logical to me.
Well, I don't know how much of a percentage of the population of Santa Cruz is Hispanic. I live here in Watsonville. Watsonville is like 75-80% Hispanic. So if you want to see
34%, sir. I saw 34%
in Santa Cruz
while I was researching
in Santa Cruz.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's a considerable minority. Just the same. Where do I start?
It's a big topic, and you're getting down to your...
Hang on a second. Let me respond, for gosh sakes. I'm just trying to get my thoughts in order. You cannot build cheap housing on expensive land. Santa Cruz is a place kind of like San Francisco. There's only so much territory between the ocean and the mountains. This is what's buildable. You have a lot of people who decide, I want to live there. They bid up the price of housing. You are unhappy because somebody comes along and builds more apartments, and they only want to rent out 50 of them, or out of 300 at below market rates. That's really kind of abusive. How would you feel? Suppose you were in the business of building guitars. Let's say that was what your business was. You build guitars, and you built 20 or 30 guitars, and somebody came in and said, well, these 6 guitars here you have to sell for $50 a piece. The rest of your guitars you can sell for whatever they're worth. But these guitars you have to sell for $50 a piece. And you'd get rather peeved. You'd say, well, look, I worked just as hard on those guitars as I did on these others. You're taking the bread out of my mouth. And you'd be right. So when the government comes to a developer and said, you have to build these housing units, you have to build them up to our codes, and you have to build them on this expensive land that you had to buy, and you have to get the financing and everything. But once you've got them done, in spite of the fact that you could rent them for $2,400 a month, we're going to insist that you rent them for $1,000 a month. Again, where's the fairness in that?
No, I understand. I don't think there's a lot of fairness in the real estate thing. You said high money and look for land. I think your real estate companies have destroyed that. They tend to build up a lot of money. This is how much your land's worth, and
Sorry.
Anyway, it's kind of
no. Land prices are set by a market. You have this idea that prices are set by somebody deciding this is the price. Prices are set by a process called the market. A market is where you have buyers and sellers. You have people who have housing, people who are landlords who either are selling houses or renting apartments. They are the supply. Then you have people who want these things. They have jobs, they make money, they want a place to live. And they offer a certain amount. The seller says, no, I want more. Eventually, a bargain is reached. And evidently, the bargain, the market price, the place where, Santa Cruz is a very high-income town. A lot of the people there, they have jobs over the hill in Silicon Valley. They make huge salaries. They work at the University of California. They make 6-figure salaries. Santa Cruz is not a poor man's town.
But they've market valued and inflated the prices here, sir.
Exactly. That's what happens when you get wealthy.
Anyway, you're getting about 3 minutes in.
That's what happens. That's what happens when you get wealthy people who want something. Go to Pebble Beach sometime. Take a look at the Concours down there, where they have these automobiles that are bid at hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars. You can't afford those either. Again, if a price is not something that's set in order to abuse you or to punish you. A price is set because this is the value of a particular commodity. And housing in Santa Cruz is expensive. So if you can't afford to live in Santa Cruz, you may wind up moving someplace else.
Yeah, very expensive for me too, and I guess the construction costs too is what had them take out and go away for that building project. So, anyway, appreciate it for the talk, sir. I thank you so much.
Have a good day.
I like your disagreements. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
I know that Evan's concerns are those of a lot of people, and they have this idea that, well, the prices are too high. Yeah, for you, yes. For somebody else, no. That's why I don't like this term affordable housing. I hear it all the time. You have to have more affordable housing. All housing is affordable for somebody. Mar-a-Lago is affordable for Donald Trump. Are you going to buy it? Nope, neither am I. And frankly, what's the old saw? Happiness isn't getting what you want, it's wanting what you get. I have a 70-year-old tract house here in Watsonville. This is my home. I love it. I'm happy with what I have. I'm grateful for it. And I hope that by the time, I think Evan is younger, I hope by the time he gets to be my age, he's been able to put together some kind of a career that enables him to have the place he wants to live in. But it might not be the place in Santa Cruz. I just hope he winds up wanting what he gets. That's all. But the idea that prices are set by some authority somewhere, no, prices are set by supply and demand. And sometimes that information, when conveyed to you, is unpleasant because you find that the price for something is more than you can afford. And that's what's known as life. Okay, half a minute remains until the top of the hour. It is going to be 11 o'clock, and our third hour will be coming up. I've got a couple of things that I believe I can lay before you then. Or, of course, more phone calls are always in order. When the next hour starts, buzz me right away, and we'll talk as long as you like. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number. And as always, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Time now is 11 o'clock on the Charles Freedman program. Okay, for the pod people, a little John Stossel. Freeloaders, it says here, the wealthy.
I'm ashamed to admit it, but I'm a freeloader. And in big government America, it's we rich people who freeload the most.
Years ago, I built this beach house. That's younger me there. The house was on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. A risky place to build, but I built anyway, 'cause a federal program guaranteed my investment.
It can happen to you. Protect your home with flood insurance.
Congress created government flood insurance to help foolish people who don't buy private flood insurance and lose their homes when the water rises.
The flood insurance program provides valuable protection for approximately 5.5 million homeowners.
So taxpayers may help foot the bill if a flood hits movie stars' homes on Malibu Beach, or Derek Jeter's new mansion in Florida, or the Kennedy family compound. Why? We rich people should insure our own homes. Eventually, a storm swept away my first floor, but I didn't lose a penny. Thanks. I never invited you there, but you paid for my new first floor. Then the whole house went. Government flood insurance covered my loss and many others.
We rich people freeload off you taxpayers all the time because the overpromisers in there keep churning out special deals for politically favored groups. And they tend to be rich people because the rich can afford lobbyists.
There are thousands of lobbyists within a few blocks of where I was standing. If you want some advantage, you pay them to persuade Congress to give you a special tax break like the one for electric cars.
It is endless the possibilities that this bill will pursue, encouraging energy-efficient products such as plug-in hybrid cars.
His tax credit led dealers like this one to advertise free cards. Buy one for $6,000, get a $6,000 tax credit. Governor Mike Huckabee got one. His friend got 7. And I got this one. Totally free.
Free for me anyway. You taxpayers paid for it.
Then I put solar panels on the roof of my new home. Why? Because Congress gave me a big tax break.
If you want to, for instance, invest in solar energy in your home, we have tax credits in there.
So many of these programs that are supposed to have a broad benefit end up having a narrow benefit.
To me. To us who are rich enough to put solar panels in the house or buy an electric car or have a beach house on the edge of an ocean.
So it's another situation where the government creates a benefit and the people with more money, with better tax accountants, are better able to take advantage of it.
We cannot turn back. Not with an economy to fix and farms to save.
Farmers get lots of well-intended handouts from government. But who benefits? Mostly rich farmers. And people like Bon Jovi, who owns acres of land in New Jersey but pays only $100 in state property tax. Because he raises honeybees, he qualifies for a honeybee subsidy. Bruce Springsteen owns hundreds of acres of land but pays little tax on it because an organic farmer works his land. His poorer neighbors pay more.
It's unfair that I have to pay for an acre and a half $6,000, and then they're paying for hundreds of acres for $200.
America's single biggest recipient of farm subsidies has been Maurice Wilder. The multimillionaire owns some farmland, but he mostly builds homes and offices. Here's one of his many homes. Gorgeous view, but no crops around here. Others who've collected farm subsidies are basketball star Scottie Pippen, billionaire Ted Turner, even the family of anti-subsidy Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. None of these people broke any laws. They or their families just own land that qualifies for handouts.
But think about how much money we could save if these guys just didn't pass so many laws that encourage freeloading.
But they do, year after year. They micromanage life with subsidies. And the winners are not so much the needy, but people like Bon Jovi, Ted Turner, Maurice Wilder, and me.
Enough bad music. Okay, let's see here. A little less than a minute left. Okay, that's cool. Oh dear. Sorry about that. I got engrossed reading something. Yes, I'll share it with you. Before I do, though, first of all, welcome to the third hour. It's 11:06. Telephone number 831-265-5050. I'm still thinking about that last phone call, Evan. Very valuable call because I need to know just exactly what kind of thinking is going on out there, what kind of information is being presented. He mentioned that he was looking at some, Santa Cruz local or something like this. Santa Cruz being a left-wing town is full of left-wing people presenting left-wing views. And the fact that rents are high in Santa Cruz gives them a pulpit to pound on. Rents are high in Santa Cruz. What are you going to do? Come along and say, hey, that's not true? Don't be ridiculous. Of course it's true. But there are reasons for it. And nobody bothers discussing those. And this is why, for Evan and others like him, I would suggest, get a hold of either something by Thomas Sowell, or better yet, a copy of Free to Choose by Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman wrote this book along with his wife, Rose Friedman. They both happen to be doctorates in economics. Milton Friedman was a Nobel laureate in economics. These are brilliant people. But the book, Free to Choose, is written in plain everyday language. There's no talk in there about marginal propensity to consume versus marginal propensity to save. None of that. None of that. Instead, things are explained in terms of what people do. Economics is the way in which people order their decisions. Earlier I talked about a guy who, he makes guitars. That's how he makes his dough. He makes guitars. The price of guitars, hey, this is an important thing to him. And if somebody comes along and says, you can't sell your guitars for as much as somebody's willing to pay for them, wow. That puts a hole in your boat, doesn't it? Zach's on the line. Let's find out what he has to offer today. Hello, Zach. Thank you for the call.
Oh, hello. Thank you for taking it. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you come through.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, so just a little background. We moved here from Modesto like you, my family did, when I was a kid. I was 10 years old. We came into Watsonville. And we came from, Modesto, then we moved to Fresno just for a year. And we had a 3-bedroom, really, older house, but it was a nice house, well kept. And we moved to Watsonville, and because houses were so expensive, and my parents were looking for a house that they could actually afford. They were so expensive anywhere in Santa Cruz County, or even in Monterey County, that we had to live in an apartment for a while. And then when they finally did find a place that they could afford, it was a fixer-upper times 10. Uh-huh. It was like a mobile home. Oh, yeah. It was a mobile home where somebody had a clogged sewer line, so they drilled holes in the sewer line.
That's bright.
Let's see, what else? Yeah, exactly. Real nice. So my dad had to fix all that. We had to put, I helped my dad rebuild a deck when I was 10 years old. I got real strong when I was 11 because I got in trouble and I had to dig by hand a leach field, a whole leach field by hand.
Yeah.
And my dad didn't want to, he couldn't afford to rent. You know what I mean? So it's just, and I just am telling you this, I'm telling this story, you understand, but Evan, it's always been expensive in Santa Cruz County. And I don't know, I think rents have always been higher too. It's just the market rate. It's just and my dad, he's an engineer. He's been an engineer, since I was born. So it's not like that he, it's not that he was impoverished. It's just that literally he was so poor in the sense of the market value of Santa Cruz County that we had to, put sweat equity into a place. And now they own, the story goes now is they own 2 businesses. They have 3 properties. Anyway. And, you just gotta sacrifice, because the market rate here has always been high. It will never change because it's so desirable. The weather's great. There's beaches, there's forests, there's there's everything here. And everyone wants to live and retire here. And a retirement for somebody who has been saving their whole lives can't afford to drop cash on a house. They can sell their house. It's hard. It's hard. I empathize with them. I sympathize actually, because when I was sorry, I'm rambling on, but this is kind of important, because when I left the area because I couldn't afford to live here, so I moved, and I tried to make it on my own. But guess what? I was still earning the market rate pay of the area I moved in. I moved I moved away somewhere else first. Then I moved to Colorado and Oregon, and they pay less in those 2 states than they do here. So the market is everywhere. It's inescapable, even in, and here's the funny thing, even in a communist society, the market is inescapable. There's an underground market. You can wait in a bread line in Cuba, or you can go in this back alley in Havana, and some guy's got some bread, but he's going to sell it to you for 100 times the cost that the state store would sell it to you as. But you're desperate for it because you're waiting all line in the bread line all day and didn't get your bread, so you'll pay the higher price. There's always a market, is what I'm saying.
Right, and when the state steps in and tries to distort the market, you wind up with a state store that the price of bread is dirt cheap, but they don't have any.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just I wish, a lot of people out there don't understand. If they understood the market, then what you said is correct. It would lower prices if people would be good consumers and shop smartly. You know what I mean? Like buy fixer-uppers, buy the lower end. Don't go for the expensive stuff, because then you're creating a market for the expensive stuff. If you're trying to start out, shop hard, be a good consumer. I'm saying good consumer. Well, do whatever you want, but be a smart consumer,
right,
and get the most for your money, and that brings the cost down.
Yeah,
of anything. Yeah, and when the government steps in, yeah.
As a buyer, as a consumer, you are not powerless. I mean, nobody can force you to spend your money. If I'm offering a given product and I'm asking $10, nobody's buying. What do I have to do? I have to drop my price. Okay, well, will you give me $8? And this is how prices are brought down by people saying, no, I'm not going to pay you that much.
Yeah. It's just you just like if you hire a guy that, let's say, to clean your carpets or something. One guy says, I'll do it for $1,000. Another guy says he'll do it for $500. You just do a little simple inquiry. Well, wait, both guys have the same equipment. Well, of course you're going to hire the guy doing it for half the cost, for $500. It's just simple economics. I mean, even in a communist society, there's still a market. There's always a market. That's the thing. It's physics. It's inescapable. And the sooner people understand it, the sooner people grasp it, that is what's going to make things better for everybody.
Hang on a second.
But this area here...
Hang on a second. Evan has called in, and he says this only works on paper. Maybe I'm misinterpreting that. Let's find out. So, Evan, you're saying that... Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like this sidestep economics that you guys tend to refer to only works on paper. We're not in a utopia kind of world where that could work. We have these, again, real estate companies that are overpricing your market rate, overpricing your places to live. And it just doesn't seem to work out. I'm sorry, I don't agree with you guys. I may agree if it's a utopia form of world.
Are you saying it's like a trust, like they're getting together and raising the prices or something?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened here in Santa Cruz. You had so many housing landlords refusing to do these initiatives that would go ahead and lower rents around here. I think it was Measure M that just completely got destroyed because of these corporate or just landlords in general have been taking over this county.
I don't know what to say. I mean, if they're breaking a law, then
actually, Zach, what they were trying to do was avoid a law. This measure would have essentially come in. It was a rent control measure, and it would have limited the amount they could charge. Again, suppose you're manufacturing. You make guitars for a living, and somebody comes along and says, "We're going to pass a law that says you cannot charge more than $100 for your guitar." And you're saying, "Wait a minute, I have to be able to make more than that. And it takes me this way." And what people are willing to pay more. I make a really good guitar. People are willing to pay $500 for my guitars, and the government comes along. The people who buy guitars come along and say, "Well, no, we're going to have a law that says you can only charge $100 for a guitar." At that point, you're using the law to abuse the producer of guitars. What the landlords did, they organized, they got together and said, "Look, you're telling us that we put all this money to building a product. The product has a certain value. People are willing to pay this much for it, and you're telling us we can't charge what it's worth. That's not fair. That's not right." If they are overpricing their product, you'll know that because what will happen is nobody will buy. If you offer apartments in Santa Cruz for $10,000 a month, you're not gonna rent them. Nobody will pay that. And so, yes, it is possible to overcharge, and if you do overcharge, what happens? You don't get any money because nobody will pay what you're asking. That's the market. And it's not utopian. There's nothing utopian about it. A utopian society is perfect. The market isn't perfect. But the market is the best and most efficient way of allocating available resources.
And in my opinion, inescapable.
I apologize. What did you just say?
He said.
In my opinion, the market.
He said it was inescapable.
Oh no, I 100% agreed with you when you did say that at the beginning. I appreciate it, guys. Again, I think I kind of agree to disagree again. Your economics only works on paper. We don't have a perfect world here. I think I'll just end it with that. I thank you guys.
Evan, you are misunderstanding. Neither Zach nor I are speaking about a utopia. Neither of us are utopians. We don't believe in that. You're a regular listener to this program. You know that I have been scornful of utopians on this program. And if basic capitalist economics were utopian, I would not be a devotee. But again, get a copy of Free to Choose by Milton Friedman and read it. It will not confuse or bewilder you with fancy economic terminology and like that, but it will illustrate to you how real economics works in the real world. And you forget about just theories and on paper. This is story after story of human beings behaving as human beings behave, attempting to do the best they can for themselves.
But we're not in a real world, though. We're not in a real world here, and human beings aren't being human beings.
Of course. Oh,
sir. We have a lot of these landlords that are just completely and utterly don't understand the economics of how poor people work.
Check this out. Even if they were doing something like avoiding a law or a trust, whatever, the force that's greater than that is the market still. The market owns the day. You can't, they could form a trust if they want, but guess what? If they raise the rents too high, no one is going to rent their product. No one. It's just, or maybe some will, but it better be darn good quality, because people are consumers. You're a consumer. I'm a consumer. You know, if I see mold on the chicken, I'm not buying that chicken. I don't know about you. I think, you know,
I see problems. Unfortunately, I see problems with these new buildings popping up. They could pop up so quickly. It's like, what issues are they going to have? Mold, water damage. I guarantee it. There's probably some problems in these new buildings that they've popped up already.
I wonder.
You know, and who's in control of this? The market rates, though. Again, these landlords and corporate entities that have no, sir. Again, you guys don't understand that the market is already taken over by these entities.
No.
These corporate people that have already taken over, these real estate agencies that have already taken over our land.
No.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was reading.
No. Yeah, well, and where were you reading it? In some left-wing Santa Cruz publication.
Our local Santa Cruz, I'm sorry, no, our local Santa Cruz County, there's no leftist or right about that.
Please. You would come to me and say, hey, I was just reading something in the SEIU bulletin. And
I'm sorry, but we have so many narcissistic people out here. Like my other landlord, he'd go ahead and take his property and go ahead and market rate his property, and it's ridiculous. And then these low, I don't think your market is pretty great. And again, you're
Evan, you're saying that, you're repeating yourself here. But again, I would impress upon you this: the market. It's not a matter of it being great or lousy. It's a matter of it being real. It's a matter of market is where buyers and sellers meet and agree on a price. And if there are buyers who can afford to pay more than you, and therefore they bid prices up to a level that you can't meet, well, at that point you become frustrated with the market. You say, hey, this market's no good because the price that it's set is too high for me. Yeah, it is. Hey, I'll tell you what. I'm just lucky that Zach was talking about buying a house over here. My grandparents bought this house I'm living in 1952. They paid $13,500 for it. And they paid off the mortgage and like that. And the house was then my mother's, and now it's mine. If I had not had this house on that base, I don't know whether I'd have a house or not. I was able, in the early 90s, I bought a piece of property near here. At that time I was married. My wife and I were both working. We bought a house. A few years later we split up. I bought out her half of the house. I continued to pay the mortgage on it. The house presently appreciated dramatically. I was lucky. I happened to hold a piece of property at a time when the market moved up tremendously. So what happened? I bought the house for $140,000, I think, and I wound up selling it for $480,000. That was the market that did that. Oh, I maintained the house and kept it in good condition, but gracious, yeah, I made out tremendously. And so did anybody else who happened to buy in when I did. But gracious, this idea that the market is somehow doesn't work because you don't like the answers it gives you, no, I'm sorry. The market is not utopian. It is real.
Well, I find your policies, real quick, I do find that the policies are out of whack as well. Generally, again, when you flood your market with these people from the southern countries, and then, oh, God, now we need, again, that 30% of Hispanics around here. God, now we need, they've got like 4 or 5 children now since the I was born 1984. Saw the influx in the early 90s.
See, now you're talking
granted,
about...
Yeah, oh, God, now we need more housing.
Well, now you're talking about... But now you're talking about another issue. You're talking about illegal and legal immigration. I've always been against illegal immigration, and I understand that in California, for example, where we have something like 3 or 4 million illegal immigrants, if all of them suddenly were back in the countries where they belong, pressure on housing prices, on electricity, on roads, on water, on power. All of these things would be reduced. I understand that. So you and I agree
I'm
about
going to leave
that.
you guys when we're something here we're agreeing with. I appreciate it, Zach, for calling in. Thanks again, Charles, for having me on again.
Okay.
Thank you again.
Have a good day. Well, I don't know.
I wish. Yeah, I mean, it's the what looks good on paper to me is something like communism, where it's everything's egalitarian on paper, but then in reality, it's just couldn't be further from the truth, as history has proven. But
yeah. I
don't know. The market is an ever-present thing everywhere, even in a communist society, and it's there. It's not, and like you said, it's not utopian. It's not perfect, but it's what it is.
Well, thank you very much for the call, Zach, and for sharing your own personal experience there.
No problem.
Very valuable. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
This brings me to something that I was just going to get to. In the Hearst Press a couple of days ago, Sarah Smith of San Francisco wrote this. I was stunned to read that 9 households own 15% of the wealth in Silicon Valley. Here's a dream. They each chip in a few billion to free California from the retribution of the Trump administration. High-speed rail could be completed. Art institutions could be funded. Social and environmental agencies could fulfill their roles. Public transportation could expand. Academic institutions could continue their work, and public universities could offer tuition-free education for Californians. The list goes on. I'm sure these 9 households know each other, get together one afternoon, and immediately raise the quality of life for us all. Now that, friend Evan, that's utopian. That is utopian. Somehow, if we take these wealthy people and they give up their billions, everything will be fine. Well, 2 days later, there are a couple of other letters to the editor in the paper in response to that one. One is from Priscilla Rich of Danville. Get a load of this. Regarding Spread the Wealth, bravo, Sarah Smith, suggesting our billionaire neighbors step forward to counter the harm done. I particularly like the fact that she put completing our overdue high-speed rail from SF to LA on top of the list. Now there's another utopian project. Oh, it's gonna get us from one end to the other in 2 hours and 40 minutes. No, it's not. It cannot possibly. 3.5 hours is the best it can possibly do. That's a simple objective fact. It's going to pay for itself in operation. No, it won't. It's going to require subsidies forever. I would like to add more to that list, including one that would have a global effect. We need massive support in drawing down atmospheric carbon and CO2 that's creating our extreme weather. Our company, one company's doing just that. Billionaire Bill Gates supports Climeworks, which is headquartered in Zurich. A second one is a U.S.-based company. There's a third one that draws carbon out of the ocean. Now, here's the key paragraph. Listen to this. My nonprofit invites any billionaire to step forward to support any or all of these with our initiative called Billionaires for a Livable Planet. Spread your wealth. In other words, give me your money. Give me your money. This is from Priscilla Rich of Danville. And as I read this, all I could think of was something else I'd seen within just the last couple of days. You know, obviously, there were horrible wildfires in Southern California 6, 8, 7 months ago. Since that time, bear in mind, this is Southern California. There are a lot of very talented people down there, many in the performance industries of various sorts, music, art, drama. Okay, so what did they do? Well, they did what Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland would have done 100 years ago. They put on a show for fire relief. We're going to put on this big show. We're going to have great world-class entertainment. We want people to contribute. We want to raise money to help rebuild. They raised $100 million. So far, they have dispersed $75 million of that money. Where has it gone? To people like Priscilla Rich. It's all gone to these nonprofits. How much of it has actually gone to anybody who was burned out? Not a penny. And at least this is something that's, I always think of it when I'm not on the air, but I'm thinking of it today. In many cases, these nonprofits are some of the biggest thieves yet going around unarmed, which makes them all the more effective. The money they get legally. It's given to them. And after all, if somebody gives you dough, are you a thief? No. If I ask you for money and you say, give me $10. Okay, here's $10. Am I a thief? No, I asked and you gave. And that's the business model of these nonprofits. They ask, people give, and what do? Well, they do very well, is what they do. The people who run these nonprofits pay themselves very handsomely for their services. The nonprofit might have a few staffers and people who work for it who are paid handsomely for their services. The nonprofit might even make investments, which then pay off and help pad the account. Nonprofits, I'm not saying don't ever give anything to a nonprofit. There are nonprofits that are quite reputable and do valuable work. But caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. If you're going to give dough to one of these people, make damn sure that you're not giving dough to, for example, the nonprofits in Southern California that are siphoning off millions that decent people gave to benefit victims of a terrible natural disaster. Those nonprofits are ghouls feasting on the bodies of fire victims. They are vile. Priscilla Rich here, well, she's merely essentially very transparent. It's very kind of her in her letter to say, my nonprofit, send me your dough. So I'm an agendized person. I wonder how much of her money and her nonprofit's money she plans to waste on that high-speed rail project. She going to actually throw her money into that? Well, I guess it's conceivable. But talk about pickles down the rat hole. I must offer congratulations. Oops. Time for the bottom of the hour. Okay, I'll save my congratulations for when we get back. Here are some messages. 2 minutes. If you want to make a phone call during these 2 minutes, 831-265-5050.
Cannabis is one of nature's most beneficial plants, and at Treehouse Dispensary, we use it to build community. In addition to dispensing cannabis and education, Treehouse hosts First Friday events every month that feature our community's local artists, makers, and activists. If you're 21 plus, join us at 3651 Soquel Drive every First Friday from 5 to 8 p.m. to enjoy the work of local artists and musicians, find one-of-a-kind gifts, and learn more about the top cannabis products in California. See you soon.
I've got a question for you. Do you want a lower car payment just by making a phone call? You know, most people buy a car and they pay whatever the car dealer says their interest rate is, and they forget about it and make payments. But did you know there is a secret in your contract that allows another company to refinance any car payment to try and lower it? It's true. There is indeed a company out there that knows the ins and, more importantly, the outs on car loans, and they know how to lower your current car payments. It's easy and fast, and you could have a lower car payment next month. Make this free call right now and find out if you could lower your existing car payment. Call the Car Savings Hotline right now. The call is free.
Call now. 800-471-4435. 800-471-4435. 800-471-4435. That's 800-471-4435.
You never get a second chance to make a good first impression. When you want to make a good first impression, start with Dynamic Press Angelo.
Dynamic Press can take care of every printing need, from business cards to stationery, apparel, mailings, brochures, everything but money.
When you want to make a good first impression, start with Dynamic Press in Santa Cruz.
479-7920. dynamicpress.com.
Okay, welcome back, and we do have a caller on the line, Mark, in Santa Cruz, and he wants to talk about real estate. Hello, sir. Welcome, and thank you for the call.
Hey, Charlie. You know, interesting conversation on the two people calling in. The fellow describing his family moving here and digging in their leach fields and a septic system. Right now, I live in Corralitos, and there's a house, 2 houses down, and it's been sitting vacant for almost 10 years. So it can't be rented. Working family can't move into it. And the issue is it has the old redwood septic tank. This house was built in 1918. The permit in Santa Cruz County to redo a septic tank, put in a septic tank, the permit alone is $60,000.
Oh, jeez.
To put in the septic tank with the nitrogen digesters and such that they demand, you're going to be $80,000 at the minimum for a septic tank. So that's government kind of getting in the way, but that's what they do.
Hey, I got a question.
Another thing, yes.
Does that redwood septic tank still work?
Oh, yeah. But you can't. But the house needs work, and to get work, you have to get a permit on putting on a new roof or whatever. And they will not issue any permits for fixing the house until you fix the septic tank. So it's.
But wait a second. Hold it, Mark. I just asked you a question. Does the redwood septic tank work? And you said yes, it does. So it doesn't need fixing, does it?
Well, according to our county, it does. It needs removal. Can't fix it. You got to take it out.
See, that is so bloody ridiculous.
But yeah,
if the county wants to come along and say, look, you cannot put in redwood septic tanks anymore. We have environmental issues with them. Okay, but the ones that exist, to simply say, hey, as long as they work. And frankly, that's why I asked the question, because it would seem to me that a redwood septic tank would probably work for a long, long time.
1918 on. Yeah, that's the big issue up, where the big burn areas are, where all the houses burnt down, and why they're not getting rebuilt, because the people can't afford the permit for a septic tank to get started on rebuilding their home. And, it's odd because the septic tank obviously did not burn up.
No.
But there's permit requirements, and these people cannot rebuild up there. Another thing, I bought my house in 1994, and, I paid it off. In 1994, my house in Corralitos was appraised at $250,000.
Okay.
I had to come up with $30,000 cash down payment. So $30,000 down payment. Then I had to get something called PMI, private mortgage insurance. I had to pay a fee monthly to a bank that would ensure that I would not leave and not, I would renege on my loan. So I had PMI, which took me several years to pay off. In 2008, we elected a new president. Remember that guy?
Yeah. Tall, skinny guy with ears.
Yeah, Mr. Obama. He came in with one plan that people should be able to buy a home with zero down, nothing down. So people were buying homes. They had an inclusionary clause, like the homes they build out by where Target is. That if you were a contractor, you're building 4 homes, one has to be affordable. So you're building homes for $600,000, where you're going to have to sell one for $400,000. The other three you're going to have to sell for $750,000. So they were inflated on costs. But the big issue is all those zero down homes, and also people buying homes that were not economically viable. They couldn't afford these homes, but the banks couldn't turn them down, brought in the economic crisis of 2008 that we all lost our 401ks on. The banks folded. Many banks went under. The people lost their homes. It was a disaster. So when the government steps in, one, on environmental conditions, septic tanks, and government steps in on economic issues, hey, people shouldn't have to make a down payment. People do not pay PMI, private mortgage insurance, anymore. And if you sell some homes, you have to set some homes aside to be affordable and raise the prices on the other homes. When the government steps in, like we've seen in the past, it was a disaster. And it didn't just affect, again, people purchasing homes or selling homes. It affected me and my 401k, which took a huge, huge hit. It took me years to recoup from.
You know, during the
so
years...
no, I don't want the government stepping in.
During the years that was going on, I had a guy who did a call-in advertising gig on my program, and he was in the mortgage business. And he was telling me that for the first time in his career as a mortgage broker, he was seeing people, they'd get a mortgage, and they would not even make a single payment. Not even one. Not even the first payment. And they would just be foreclosed on. And I was wondering, who's making money? Well, the mortgage broker that wrote the mortgage made money. And maybe they borrowed a little more than they needed for their down payment, so they might have made a little money, but then they just walk away from the whole thing without making a single payment. One other problem I have, you use the term affordable for housing. You've heard me on the program, I'm sure, complain about misleading terminology. For example, pro-choice instead of pro-abortion. For example, gender-affirming care instead of sex change operation. For example, affordable instead of below market. Cheap. Every bit of housing is affordable. I made the point a little while ago today. Mar-a-Lago is affordable if you're Donald Trump. So this term affordable housing, this is a piece of misleading nomenclature dreamed up by the left to make it sound more attractive. The actual term is below market or sub cost. In other words, you're insisting on somebody losing money. You're insisting on somebody selling or renting a product for less than it's worth. You're abusing that person. Affordable hell.
And giving them a subprime mortgage. One thing I think government could look at, or we as a community could look at, and it's starting to be looked at various cities, towns around the area, is the short-term rental. The people rent their home out on Airbnb for the weekend. And so they're taking homes, residential homes off the market and turning them into rental units, short-term rentals, sort of like a hotel or whatever. So my problem with that, it takes a lot of homes in the area off the market where working families could do long-term rentals, for years, move in and get rolling. That housing is not available to them anymore. And then two, the home becomes a commercial entity. So my area is zoned R1, residential, one family, single family home. Now, if they're taking a home in the neighborhood, making a commercial venture out of it, Airbnb, and renting it out every weekend for whatever, it's no longer an R1 zone home. So immediately, I think they should be taxed at a commercial rate on the property. It's a motel. But my thought is, if end this process and let the working people in Santa Cruz County rent these homes, so they can raise their family, get to work, and get on with their lives. But these homes are not available to them anymore, and it's a huge number. They're saying Lake Tahoe it's approaching 40% of the homes are Airbnb. So the people who work in the casinos or the hotels or whatever, they don't have anywhere to live. But I think it's something that needs to be looked at.
So you're saying that a person is buying a home, they never live in it at all? Because when I think of Airbnb,
Correct.
normally what I think of is somebody, they're going to be, they're taking a 2-week vacation to Bali, and so they rent their home out for 2 weeks to somebody who wants to come where they are and live in their house, which makes all kinds of sense to me. But you're saying, no, this is a permanent arrangement, that it's, from week to week, it's always these transients who are coming in. At that point, yes, I agree with you. This is no longer a private residence. This is a business, and that should change the tax status. You're absolutely correct on that.
And you're correct on how it started. And people would rent out their home if they're going to be gone for a week or two, which I would never do, but, fine. But, yeah, I had a friend who bought a house in San Juan Bautista. It's never going to live in it. And it's Airbnb rental, and it's rented out every week to tourists.
Wow.
As a place to stay. So
well,
pretty common.
Well, evidently he found out he can make more money that way than he can by renting it out long term or by selling it. So it's his property.
Oh, you go down Pleasure Point, $1,000, $2,000 a weekend. Yeah, believe me, you're doing pretty well.
Yowie!
And of all places, Carmel is outlawing this. So they're looking at the same thing. The people work in the Carmel restaurants, Carmel bars. They need a place to live, and Carmel's going to open up, the housing for the working people. And I think Santa Cruz County really needs to look at this.
Well, thank you for talking about this. This is an issue that hadn't been on the radar. Appreciate the call.
Thank you, Charles. And my home that I bought for $250,000 is no longer worth $250,000.
Yeah. You made a good investment there. Made a very good investment there.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Charles.
Yeah. One thing that goes into that, California real estate has always been a good investment. Granted, there's momentary depressions in the market after the great crash of 2007. My house here declined in value significantly. I was even able to get a property tax adjustment on that basis. But subsequently, the market has rebounded. I've made up all that ground and more since. So long term, and after all, that's how you really should be thinking, California real estate is a good investment. When those market dips do come, that's a good time to buy. It's called a buying opportunity. Okay, we've got just enough time for me to do this. I want to get back to this lady who wrote this letter. Oh, this utopian idea. All the top Silicon Valley billionaires should get together and give their money to accomplish all these leftist dreams. And another woman saying, yeah, give me, I have a nonprofit here that will do that for you. You give me your money. Well, Lawrence Teixeira, a gentleman in Clovis in Fresno County, said this. So typical of short-sighted, naive socialists, she suggests that 9 extremely wealthy Silicon Valley families each chip in, quote, a few billion, unquote, to help fund all of the free stuff that she feels Californians deserve. According to Ms. Smith, these 9 families can afford to finish building the high-speed rail money pit, fund art institutions, offer free college tuition, and several other goodies. As is so typical, however, she never stops to think about who pays to operate all these free services, or who pays to continue things like free tuition after the money runs out, or who continues to subsidize the high-speed rail project, which never draws anywhere near the ridership it needs to break even. Former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher said of socialism, sooner or later you run out of other people's money. When there are no more millionaires or billionaires, guess who they'll come after next? Words of wisdom. A very unusual thing to find in the San Francisco Chronicle, it being a Hearst publication after all. So kudos to them for printing that. I can hardly wait to see how many outraged leftists will respond and say, oh, that guy Teixeira and Clovis, he's just terrible. We hate him, we hate him, we hate him. Sometimes hearing the truth is a frustrating thing for people who have been essentially insulated against it. Insulated against, I guess that's a good way of putting it. Very quickly, I have the time. I was starting to talk about this earlier, and we got some phone calls, and as always, phone calls take top priority. A few days ago, the Wall Street Journal printed an editorial concerning Sarepta. Good news from Washington for a change. The Food and Drug Administration has thought better of yanking a gene therapy for boys with a rare and devastating muscular condition. Now the onus is on the agency to show it won't repeat this debacle and will encourage innovation that leads to faster cures. FDA said Monday that the agency recommended a partial lifting of a hold on shipments of the gene therapy Elevidys, which treats Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Our editorial went online Sunday, reported the agency had used rare deaths in patients with advanced disease as a pretext to relitigate the drug's approval and force it off the market. The agency now says boys who can still walk independently can receive this gene therapy. This was always the right answer based on available evidence of the treatment's risks and benefits. In June, the company suspended the drug for boys who could no longer walk. While digging into the emerging safety concerns, FDA press release nods that the patient community is an important voice, and thank heavens. The Trump administration was hearing from Duchenne parents who want this important clinical option for their sons and think they and their doctors are capable of making informed choices. Such patients are portrayed by the paternalistic left and the anti-pharma right as desperate and preyed on by villainous drug companies. But patients are better suited to choosing treatments than Washington regulatory afflatus, and the alternative with Duchenne is an inexorable decline and death. This is a nasty condition. One hopes this episode is an anomaly, and the Trump administration is serious about the regulatory certainty and risk tolerance that produces better treatments. But it's a bad sign that the FDA has rejected 3 promising new treatments this month, including Replimunes for advanced melanoma. We are surprised by this FDA decision, said the CEO of Replimune. The issues in the rejection letter were not raised by the agency during the mid and late cycle reviews. Another company, Capricor Therapeutics, which is trying to win approval for a cell therapy that treats cardiomyopathy in Duchenne, also expressed surprise at the agency's response to its application. These are decisions of an agency that values statistical certainty above faster approvals. But Mr. Trump championed the opposite in his first term. Most people forget, when they look at Mr. Trump's first term accomplishments, one of the things they say, the Abraham Accords, of course, and a booming economy until it was ruined by COVID. But another thing he did, he signed a piece of legislation called the right to try. Do you remember that? You remember what it was? The right to try. This was to benefit people and families, a member of which was afflicted with some malady, and there was some treatment for it. And it was being held up by the FDA. Oh, no, we don't want to approve it. Other countries had approved it. You might be able to go across the border into Mexico and get it. But here in America, oh, no, 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 no. European nations, yes. America, no. And Mr. Trump signed the right to try law, giving Americans more freedom, giving Americans the right to try some of these alternative treatments. In the case of a person who's suffering a debilitating condition, a fatal condition, and the government steps in and says, oh, no, you can't try that. Hey, at that point, if somebody wants to try peach pits, let them try peach pits, for God's sake. Is it your business? It's not your life. might not do him any good. But again, whose decision is it? So President Trump had the right side of that. He said, yes, people should be free of government harassment when they're suffering from a debilitating condition. And if they are acquainted with some remedy that has shown results with other people who have their same malady, they should have the right to try that medication. Under the leftist leadership, remember, Bobby Kennedy Jr. is a left-winger. The only reason he became a Republican or backed Trump was because essentially the Democrats threw him out. He wanted to run for president, and they told him, absolutely not. You can't run against Joe Biden. Joe's our fair-haired boy. You go away. So he did. But does anybody suppose that somehow he's had an epiphany and changed the thought processes that have been with him for his entire lifetime? Of course not. The man's in his 60s. He's a full-grown adult. He's a fully formed human being, and he is not doing a 180. He's not becoming a conservative or a Republican or a person who is in favor of individual freedom. No, he's still a left-wing Democrat at heart who believes that the coercive power of the state is a valuable thing and should be used vigorously. Companies monitor these FDA decisions to decide when to file for an approval. Even a few months of delay matter if you're a patient with a terminal disease and running out of options. The rate of drug innovation is how the tenure of new FDA Commissioner Marty McCary will be judged. At least it's a victory that the FDA retreated on this Duquesne treatment. Every gene therapy done is an opportunity to get better understanding of the condition and encourage investment that may someday rid the world of this scourge. If we want better medicines, then, well, to be quite blunt, thank God for Big Pharma, because that's where they're going to come from. They're the people with the laboratory facilities. They're the people who pay the salaries of the brilliant chemists and researchers who do this kind of work. These are very highly educated people. Their work is extremely sophisticated. They deserve to be well paid. I can't do their jobs, and neither can you. And they save lives. Okay. And once again, kudos to President Trump for, in his first term, signing the Right to Try Act. Not enough of a fuss was made about that. I remember when it happened, obviously the mainstream media didn't want to bring it up because they understood that people would by and large say, yes, that's a great thing. And if there's anything they never want to do, it's publicize something President Trump had done that people will like. It is noon at SantaCruzVoice.com. I'm Charles Freedman. I will see you again tomorrow at 9:06. Enjoy your day. One 73.